So, you want to save the world with clean energy? Make money doing it? Confused about the economic and technical realities of residential and commercial solar, batteries, heat pumps, EVs? Want the real-world scoop on new energy technologies, not manufacturer hype? Then tune in to the Weekly Energy Show, hosted by Barry Cinnamon. Insights from Barry's 40-plus years in the solar and energy industry will help you understand the future ways we'll generate and consume energy. And now, here's Barry.
Welcome to this week's Energy Show. The OBBB, or One Big Beautiful Bill, not everybody says it's beautiful. It's now law in the United States. And that bill eliminates the 30% tax credit for residential solar. It adds restrictions to the 30% tax credit for commercial solar, including, for strange reasons, residential leases and power purchase agreements, which are really considered commercial type installations. So effectively, the price for cash and loan purchases of solar is going to go up 30% in 2026. January 1st, if you decide to put in solar now, you're going to be spending 30% more. Solar leasing is more complicated. Effectively, it's going to probably increase leasing prices, but the details of that hasn't been worked out. And one of the reasons why there's so much uncertainty, I hate to use the U word, but there's rules about domestic content and where the equipment's made, safe harbor considerations, foreign entity of concern, or FIAC issues. All these things are not 100% defined, so it's very hard to see how even the commercial side of the solar business is going to manifest itself next year. But in the meantime, every solar contractor I know right now is working like crazy to get systems installed by the end of the year. I think 2025 may be a record year for solar and battery installations. So smart companies are really planning now for 2026. You can't snap your fingers on New Year's Day, January 26th, and say, hey, I want to go, do this. So there's really two questions that I'm asking a bunch of really, really smart people in the industry throughout the value chain. And the two questions I'm asking are, what should solar contractors do? Residential, commercial, utilities, what should they do to succeed in 2026 and beyond? And from the customer standpoint, what should solar and battery customers consider when evaluating products and services from installers? So this week's guest is my friend, Tom McCalmont. He's the CEO of McCalmont Engineering, and he's also got a company called Paired Power, which is developing a really cool EV charging system, including automatic, very easy to install pergolas and support systems. And so it's very clever because in some ways this system can be installed off grid. Anyway, over the past 25 years, Tom's been very active in the solar industry. One of my friendliest competitors going back to like 2001 or 2002 at Regrid Power and Real Good Solar. He's president of McCalmont Engineering. And I would say he's one of the preeminent utility and commercial engineering firms that really help companies do this. And I'm very, very impressed with the Paired Power system because it's just so innovative. It's got solar panels, it's got batteries, you don't need utility, and that may be where everybody's going. Anyway, long story short, welcome to the show, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Barry. It's great to be here.
All right. Honor to have you here again. I think this is like the second or third time you've been on the show here in our scenic Los Gatos soundproof studio.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about McCalmont Engineering and Paired Power. Don't be shy.
Absolutely.
It can be a sales pitch. Don't
Absolutely,
be shy.
yeah. So McCalmont Engineering does large-scale solar design work. We do commercial, industrial, and utility scale designs. Commercial industrial would be big commercial projects, a lot of them in California, but also a lot of them in other states as well. And we also do utility scale design projects across the entire company. We're licensed in 40 plus states. We do essentially the stamp plans, the PE stamp plans, electrical plans for these big solar fields. My partner is actually the CEO of that business and runs the business, but I play a hand in that business as well.
What's his name?
Her name is Darlene.
Oh, Darlene.
And for Paired Power, I spend most of my days on Paired Power. Paired Power has developed a really innovative microgrid system. It's often used for EV charging, but it can be used for other microgrid situations as well. It's a combination of solar, energy storage, and load. That load can be different things. It can be EVs, it can be other types of load. And where that's really suitable is in places where there are grid constraints. And there's lots of places now where people are running into that problem. There's just not enough grid power, especially for EV charging. That's a big challenge for EV charging. So if you want to put in a whole 20 or 50 EV chargers, you go to your local utility and they're going to say, well, that'll take us a couple years. We're going to have to buy a transformer and add a new service drop, and it's going to be really difficult and take a long time and expensive. And we can, as an alternative, go to that same site, use the available grid power they already have there, and provide them a solution by adding solar and storage. Gets the customer what they need today. So,
how do you overcome the backfeed issue that the utility may have been worried about with that extra solar you're putting on the roof?
Yeah, so we typically don't backfeed. We're typically just taking some grid power, combining it with solar. If we do backfeed at all, it's only to offset building load. And so we're not actually pushing power out through the meter. We're just pushing power into the building to offset some of their load.
Yeah, so it's a power control system to prevent that from happening. And I'm asking some geeky questions.
No,
but
that's
these
good.
are things that I've encountered. Do these customers ever have to deal with a departing load charge?
That's a good question. So far, no. But we certainly know the utilities aren't necessarily favorable. Although I think the solution that we bring to this problem actually has a benefit to the utilities as well, because there are many situations where the utilities are struggling because of this load growth problem. Like, how do we meet the need? And at the same time, they're also a little worried about overbuild. If we meet the need and then we suddenly have more capacity than we know what to do with. So we help with both of those.
I'll just give you some of our experiences, and not that it would apply to anything that you're doing or your customers, but there's a way to expand your NEM2 systems. This is the net metering systems in California. And you're allowed to put in more PV capability, more wattage, as long as it doesn't backfeed the grid. So you have to put in this thing called a power control system. But what happens is the utilities in California, PG&E, nightmare of paperwork, they says, well, you're going to generate another, pick a number, 1,000 kilowatt hours a year. We built infrastructure to meet that need. And since now you're not going to be pulling that power from us or paying for us, we want the wholesale value of that power.
Yeah, we're going to penalize you.
And so what they do, even for a little customer that adds like 2,000 watts of solar on their pergola, they're going to come back and say, well, gee, now you have to give us another $40 a month for that power that we thought you were going to buy, even though that concept never occurred to us 10 years ago when we built the infrastructure. So wouldn't be surprised to see that kind of sleazy thing happen.
Absolutely. Yeah,
so
understood.
They've got a bag of tricks. They own the politicians, and the politicians do what they want, and they get away with things. And that was the case until the Supreme Court, the California Supreme Court decision that happened this week, actually.
which was a great decision. And we'll see what the Court of Appeals, it was referred back to the Court of Appeals, but we'll see what happens there. But certainly there was a decision at the Supreme Court in California about the unfairness of some of the policies that have been passed by the CPUC.
And, I would say the big lesson for everybody listening, whether you're a homeowner or whether you're in the solar battery business, is don't forget to support your state and federal solar industry associations, whether it's CALSA or COSIA or whatever, because they're the ones that do all the work to kind of try and at least limit some of these really, really bad decisions. Anyway, so let's kind of dive right in. And there's the questions that I asked earlier. Let's just start with the first one. What should solar contractors do to succeed in 2026 and beyond?
Yeah, well, I think it's really clear in this very difficult landscape that we're in today with, the administration and the changing regulations, that diversification is important. And you touched on some of the changes to the ITC, and residential ITC or incentive is going away relatively soon. Battery incentive for commercial systems is staying in place for many years, but the residential systems don't qualify. So there'll be a combination of how do we diversify our businesses and how do we make the systems financeable so they qualify as commercial systems. And both of those, I think, are going to be really important for installers.
Yeah, diversifying is tough. I mean, for an old guy like me, that's all I know what to do is solar and batteries. So it's really hard for me to diversify. We actually start up an HVAC business. But as long as you plan for that, it could help. And one of the things that's really working well for us is doing a lot more service.
Yeah, I think service is important. I think your decision to go to HVAC was a good decision. There are other related technologies that may be of interest to many installers. EV chargers, for example, there's a lot of interest. A lot of people are buying them and want them at their house, or they want to partially decouple from the grid by adding storage. And so I think there's opportunities like those.
While we're on the topic of EV chargers, how will the commercial EV charger business evolve? I know there's been a lot of changes and trying to take away some incentives, but kind of give us your overview of that.
Yeah, really good question. As probably some of the listeners know, the EV incentive for the cars is ending in a month, the end of September. It was terminated by what I call the big ugly bill. So that's unfortunate. I don't think it will really hurt the market long term. It's going to cause a little short-term disruption. Some people will choose not to buy an EV just because they can't get an incentive. But if you look at what's going on around the world, EV growth is just massive all around the world. China is now really the leading provider of EVs. BYD has a car now that is available for $16,000 in places like Mexico and Australia and Europe, and they're selling like hotcakes. So the rest of the world is going to electrify transportation. If we're a little slower here in the United States, we're going to get there. It's still going to happen. And it's going to happen because of pressure from international. And along with that, probably many of your listeners have driven an EV. It's a great experience, a better car, low service costs, low fuel costs. And so as you have that experience, you don't want to go back. You don't want to go back to a gas-powered car. And so what does that mean? There's still going to be growth in the market. And that growth in the market means there's demand for more EV chargers. And so that won't stop either. So I think it'll be a little bit of a hiccup, but I don't think it's going to stop the growth in the market.
Yeah, you can't put that EV genie back in the bottle.
That's
It's
right.
a superior experience. It's cheaper. It's better. You've got stuff coming, like $16,000 car from BYD coming into Mexico. I mean, we're going to see those people drive around with those cars here. You can't
Absolutely
keep
right.
them out.
That's right.
And they'll work great. Okay, from a business perspective, let's say hypothetically you had to deal with a 30% decline in top line revenue. How would you go about dealing with that at your old solar company or maybe at your engineering company?
It's a tough question.
We're anonymous here. This is all hypothetical.
I think there'll be some of it will have to be absorbed by the market, by installers, by manufacturers. To some extent, it's going to have to happen. And some of it is frankly going to be absorbed by consumers. Prices are going to go up. It's the only answer. And, for some of the reasons we've talked about, I don't think the market stops. I think people will continue to buy solar systems. They'll continue to buy EVs. But that's how it's going to evolve. It's unfortunate, but...
So as a business owner, what would you do if you see your revenues coming down? What changes would you make?
Hunker down, be more cautious on hiring decisions. We try very hard to keep people employed. We've never had a layoff, for example. We try not to do that, but it's challenging. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that a lot of companies in the solar industry are going to have to start doing. And, we had those experiences 15, 20 years ago in the solar industry. I could say I've never had at Cinnamon Energy had to do anything like that. But if you're looking at a situation where the top line revenue in the whole industry is going to go down by 30 or 40%, some of that's going to impact us. And I don't know if our diversification efforts are really going to be able to make up for that. So it's just a buckle
You
up.
and I have been doing this for 25 years. And as we like to say, we're still riding the solar coaster.
We haven't been thrown out. Yeah, and that is one of the scary things that I talked to some of the people that have only been in it for 5 or 6 years, and it's been gravy train.
That's right.
But it'll get kind of tricky. Okay, what do you think is going to happen with commercial financing? And so the residential way of commercial financing, PPAs and leases, it's analogous to what's happening on the commercial and utility side. So just talk about the commercial and utility, and we can see how that translates to residential later.
So for the engineering business, and we talked about that a little bit, we have so far not seen much of a slowdown. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think, number one, a lot of the solar projects that are occurring right now, it takes a long time to get to the stage where they're being engineered and built. And so we're kind of still on that, that path. But the other thing that's happening is load growth. And load growth is a serious problem, especially now with AI and data centers being built, and utilities are having a very difficult time keeping up with that load growth. And as you and I know, the fastest and cheapest power plant you can build today is a solar power plant. Take away the incentives even, and it's still the cheapest. And so that load growth is going to continue to drive projects. If you're Amazon and you're building a massive data center, you're not going to wait 7 years for a gas peaker plant. You're going to try to get it done in the next 2 years, and the only way you're going to do that is with a solar plant. So I see that continuing.
Yeah, I see that load growth, and sometimes in the past, and maybe a little bit now, the utilities and their value chain are exaggerating that load growth, because if they develop equipment to meet that, they're going to make a bigger profit. But it really does seem that there's a lot more demand. I think things have been soft for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
We haven't been increasing our electricity usage, mostly because of those little LED light bulbs up there.
That's right.
And people have been gradually taking those out. Those are gone now.
Yeah.
That really,
Yeah,
really made a big
the
difference.
benefit we got from energy efficiency, we've realized a lot of that benefit already. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So the load growth is here. And so I see that continuing. The utilities are struggling to keep up. The ISOs are struggling to keep up. I think you and I talked a little bit earlier. PJM, which is a big ISO in Jersey and Pennsylvania, just had an 18% price hike because they can't keep up with the load growth.
So what happens in 2 years or 3 years if the utilities or if our federal government continues to say, put in nuclear, put in geothermal, put in gas plants for which it takes 7 years to get a turbine? What happens if that's not done in 2 or 3 years? What's going to happen to the cost of electricity?
Yeah, it's going to skyrocket, absolutely. And it already is. Like
Yeah.
this PJM example is already an example of that. So, yeah, I mean, I think I've used this line before, but I'm in favor of nuclear power when the nuclear power plant is 93 million miles away.
Nuclear
So
fusion.
It's the safest,
Yeah,
the safest
yeah,
form.
yeah. And when I kind of was looking at my stock portfolio, although I hate to say it, I hope nobody hears this, but I invested in the power sector from, the entire power sector from fossil fuel to utilities and everything else, because they're going to be long-term winners. The load growth is definitely there.
Yeah.
And if we don't meet that load growth, it's just more profits for them.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So I want to kind of come back to this really cool stuff you're doing with paired power.
Sure.
We're coming up on RE Plus, formerly Solar Power International. It's going to be in a little bit about a month. Tell us about what you can discuss publicly that you're going to be showing there in a month.
Okay, we're not actually showing, but we'll be there.
Okay.
We'll
okay.
definitely be there. But yes, as I talked about, this problem is a big one. So if you're looking to put in large numbers of EV chargers, there are two problems, or maybe more than two problems. One is capacity, grid capacity. Another is the cost of that grid. And if you just put in traditional EV chargers are a heavy load. They're about 6 kilowatts for each level 2 and even more for level 3. You're going to spike your demand costs massively on that commercial bill. And people don't always really appreciate what demand is about, but demand is for instantaneous power usage. It's very, very expensive. On the coasts, California and the East Coast, you can spend $40, $50, $60 per kilowatt for every additional kilowatt that is charged to you in a month. So you can add tens of thousands of dollars of cost to your electric bill. So that's the second problem. Third problem is resiliency. You want the ability to assure that if I put in this infrastructure to charge vehicles, to fuel vehicles, that I can do it even when the grid is out, even if I lose the grid, that I have the ability to still drive. And so we solve all of those problems. So we put in a microgrid solution. We can take advantage of your available grid capacity. We can, in general, dramatically reduce or even eliminate your demand charges. And we can give you a resilient system that allows you to charge if you lose the grid. If there's a fire or an emergency and something happens that the grid's not available, you can still charge your car.
So there has been a really big push for level 3 high-speed 50 to 350 kilowatt chargers that, that can charge your car up about 80% in like half an hour or less. That requires an enormous amount of grid infrastructure.
It does.
And years of planning and very, very expensive. But what I like about the paired power system is you can do it with level 2 chargers.
Absolutely.
And that requires to make sure that those chargers are sited at places where people may be parking their car for 6 to 12 hours.
That's right.
How does that kind of work out in conjunction with the solar that's on the facility's roof and where people are kind of parking for a longer term?
Well, exactly right. So level 2, which is what we usually do, we can do level 3, but most of our systems are level 2. And the reason for that is what you typically want to do when you drive an EV is you want to fuel it when you're not in it. And that means I park it somewhere. I park it at work. I park it at home. I park it at retail. Wherever I happen to be doing something else, I go off and do something else and my car is fueling. It's not like a gas car where I need a gas station. And the only time you really need that gas station is when you're on the highway. And obviously you do want to fill it fast when you're on the highway. So that's where level 3 has a great applicability. But as you point out, level 3 is much harder to do. It takes much more grid power to build substations to power it, things like that. Millions of dollars of infrastructure. The solution that we offer is for that everyday charge, wherever you happen to be parking your vehicle, and that's really much better. And it's frankly the more common charging scenario for most EV drivers.
Yeah, what's really interesting to me is there's this concept called negative cost of power. In some states like California, there's so much PV generated during the day, utility scale, commercial, residential, that the utilities basically say between 11 o'clock and 2, we got enough power. We really don't want to buy anything. So electrical energy is basically free in the middle of the day for 2 hours before or after solar noon, whatever that is. So that's where the level 2 chargers come in really, really well. Yeah. If you can kind of be plugged in then, your commercial building may be generating power. The utilities should sell you that power really, really cheaply because otherwise nobody's going to buy it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's exactly.
I really like
it's a good complement to fit the needs. That's right, of solar.
Yeah, but come back to it. There's a lot of the utilities, particularly here in California, they're putting their foot down and trying to suppress the logical thing, the easy thing, which is let's just put rooftop solar in everywhere. But now you're putting batteries everywhere, and the degree to which that solar system and battery system does not need to be interconnected to the grid or can be set up in an export-only situation removes some of the restrictions that we have. All right, let's go back to the OBBB. We'll have that middle B be bad for us because that's the way, and politely we would say that. But what should commercial and utility customers, installers be thinking about now, and how should they take advantage of these situations?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. Quality is really, really important. Having a high-quality installer. I read a good quote recently, the bitterness of poor quality stings long after the sweetness of a good deal. I thought that was a great quote.
Yeah. And then, this thing comes back to you can, in any kind of situation, you can get 2 out of the 3, good, fast, and cheap.
Exactly. Yeah. You can only get 2 of them, though. Yep. That's exactly right. So, yes. It's really important when you're thinking about like the types of systems that we've been talking about, both for paired power, but also for the future of solar, is a more complex system, where it's not just a grid connected or grid net metered system. It now has batteries, it may have EV charging, it may have load management, all of these things combined. These are complex systems. And so you need an installer like Cinnamon that really knows what they're doing and can service that over time. That's going to assure a high quality selection of products. Will it cost you a little more? It might. But it will be a good answer for you over the long term. You're not going to buy it twice because you got a good deal on the first one, and then a few years later you had to replace it.
And that extends to the equipment also. And that's where the good installers can give you some good advice. Not that it's always going to be perfect because manufacturers come and go, but we have experience.
Yeah, that's right.
Good and bad.
I think between the two of us, we have 2 of the oldest solar companies around. So.
Yeah, it's over 50 years. Boy, we're not that old, really. We're in denial. All right. So we started off earlier when you came in, we was kind of talking about what the good news is. What's the good news about our industry and the future for our industry?
Well, the thing I love about our industry is it will win. It will. Mm-hmm. There is so much energy available from the sun. People may think that we're going to continue to use fossil fuel indefinitely, but we're not. It's going to pass. And, there was a really good article in the Wall Street Journal about a month ago, a couple of Oxford professors who talked about this. Commodity-based industries, they just kind of grow at a steady rate. The oil industry, the gas industry, it's kind of grown over. But, the price per commodity isn't much different today than it was 100 years ago if you correct for inflation. But industries that can grow that are not dependent on a commodity can grow exponentially. And we've certainly seen that to be true in the solar industry. And we saw it with iPhones. We saw it with personal computers. Like all of these industries are not dependent on any particular commodity. The energy from the sun is free. And so we're not dependent on a commodity. And so the future is very, very bright.
Yeah. And, I kind of look at it from a mass production manufacturing standpoint, where we're just kind of like stamping out these solar panels, the price of which went from, $1,000 a watt to $100 a watt to $10 a watt when we started. And now in China, it's less than, it's 12 cents a watt.
That's right.
And you can easily get solar panels here for 30 cents a watt. So that manufacturing scale is continuing to improve.
That's right.
And shortages of aluminum or silicon, whatever, it's kind of de minimis when you look at the overall benefits. And the same thing right now, we've been through it, the same thing's happening with batteries.
Yeah, that's right.
And so batteries are really, really expensive, and now the pricing's, it's just on this very fast downturn. So I'm very, very optimistic, and
I am as well.
We're kind of at the sharp end of the stick. I'm mostly on the deployment side, whether it's designing or engineering and ultimately servicing, but lots and lots of future for that. So I'm really enthused. Okay, well, we talked about being in business for a while. What prompted you to get into the solar business a few years ago?
Yeah, 25 years ago. I just wanted to do something I felt good about. I have to admit, my prior career was in telecom, and it was not a fun time when I made the transition to solar, and I just wanted to do something I felt like it gave back to the world and really left a better future for my kids and grandkids. And I'm really happy I made that decision.
Well, and if you're successful in the business and you're a conservative business person, it's not a bad income, not a bad lifestyle. It's not like, you're going to be a billionaire, but you can
eat, have a good living. Absolutely.
Yep, and then buy a new EV every 3 or 4 years.
Absolutely.
That works out fine. So what do you do for fun when you're not solaring?
Oh, we spend time in the mountains. We love music, my wife and I. We love plays. We go to plays frequently. We like to go out to dinner. And we're leaving in a few weeks to go to Ireland for 2 weeks. So looking forward to that. So
is that where some of your heritage comes from?
The McCalmont name, yes. We're actually staying at a place that has apparently owned by McCalmont's.
So you should get a discount.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Well, Tom, how can people get in touch with you, both at McCalmont Engineering and at Paired Power?
Yeah. So thank you for asking. So either company, calmont.net is our website. There's a lot of information there about the kinds of large-scale projects that we do. If any of the listeners have a need for help with commercial or large-scale projects, we'd be very interested to talk to them. For Paired Power, pairedpower.com. That's paired, P-A-I-R-E-D, because we pair power. We pair solar power with other things, load or batteries or storage. Pairedpower.com. And we'd love to talk to you if you have a microgrid challenge.
All right. That sounds great. That's all the time we have on this week's Energy Show. Thanks, Tom, for joining us. And thanks for all of our listeners for tuning in. If you missed any of today's show, you can always go to our website at energyshow.biz and listen to the podcasts.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's Energy Show.